if we're on the topic of the future, what is IT going to look like that in the year, say, 2020 or 2025?
I just want to point out first
yes,
that 2020 is not very far away.
I know, that's true. Is that not frightening? It's 2015, but it's going to be 2016 in a couple of weeks. So you're right. 2020 is scarily close. So that you should be able to do a pretty good job of predicting what's going to be happening in your self-driving car. Dana, what are things going to look like in just a few years down the road? I guess, and also, what should business people be thinking about? What should they be investing in, given the way it's going to look?
Yeah, so listening to Greg and Scott, kind of points in the right direction. That is to say, more intelligence, more data in more places being used faster. That means your feedback loops are shrunk. That means you can employ algorithmic intelligence rapidly and then let the machines decide what to do about it. Again, making intelligence not maybe artificial, but rapid and consistent and constant, and then you can learn from those iterations. So it's funny, when we thought a minute ago about the death of IT, we're thinking, okay, maybe a couple of big public cloud providers will come in and take over. But in order for that vision about the intelligence to happen, more and more of the compute activity needs to be pushed out to the edge. One of the big things that helped with big data was in-memory architectures, where the compute and the memory were very close. You didn't have to move batches of data and compute and then move it back out. Well, we have to move that out instead of in memory, out in sensor, in device, in edge, in network. And so that is another reason why it's not all just going to be one big cloud provider. All the vendors that need to create that intelligent network with all those intelligent nodes, keeping the data at the node perhaps or close to it, this is all what's going to allow that sort of intelligence, actionable intelligence at the edge to happen. And we can see that the cost of memory and the cost of compute has gone down so much, and the size of the devices are so small that this isn't really science fiction. This is really around the corner. But we need to think a little bit differently about, how do we take advantage of intelligence in the machine at the edge, and then only elevate the metadata and the analysis back to the apps and to the cloud or the data center. So that's kind of where I see things going, and it's very exciting because businesses can stop running based on intuition or the highest paid person's opinion. When you make a business decision, it will be entirely and fully evident what the right course of action should be. It's tried, it's tested, it's empirical, it's already happened 100,000 times on the edge. You're just bringing it back and centralizing it and making it policy. It means very accurate types of business decisions, very accurate personal decisions about your life, your family, your purchases, your finances. So it's kind of, we're taking the margin of error out of business, and that's significant.
Which suggests that the winners in business will rely heavily on big data, which in turn means that without a serious investment in big data, those who cannot invest heavily in big data will be left behind, is what that scenario suggests.
Why wouldn't you invest in big data? That's why it's big now, is because you can afford to crunch any data. But we can get rid of big. Big's gone. It's now actionable data. It's the right data in the right place at the right time for your machine, for your employees, for yourself, for your company. And we can afford to do this because the price points are such that why wouldn't you get every bit of data and then analyze it?
Greg, your view of where this is going in the not too distant future, what do you see happening?
Well, I think Dan is absolutely correct, and I think it's not a matter of investment into big data as much as it is, and I keep going back to good leadership in CIOs and CTOs, kind of painting that picture of how IT adds value back to the business, and which I think is critically important. And I think we're going to see a rapid acceleration of this. You said 2020. I would imagine even by 2018 we're going to see significant markers here of rapid acceleration of the Internet of Things that matter and how that's being leveraged for the.
What will those markers be? You said.
Oh, I think it's going to be, obviously it's going to be the growth of those business, or if it's not growth, it's going to be expanding profit margins for those business. I mean, I think we'll see those indicators pretty plainly from a business growth or profitability perspective. I also think, and this is going to be one of the emerging, we've all talked about kind of IoT, big data. I think the other trend that's going to be here is a more consciousness of what happens to that data, and I think privacy and security concerns are going to creep up, and I think that is going to be kind of the next focal point, because as businesses stay ahead of the technology, society is going to have to be there as well, and I think that's going to be the next challenge is the transparency for businesses to talk about how they're leveraging technology and the value to the consumer of that information, or where the risks are to the consumer for that information. We talk about data breaches and everything else. I think these things are going to get dramatically larger, and the privacy and security issues are going to become more dramatic, more significant.
Sometimes, I want to believe that. Sometimes I wonder, because it seems like consumers tend to be very willing to give up their personal information.
In the U.S., yes, but globally, okay. I don't think that's true. I think in Europe, particularly, you see very high levels of sensitivity about data management, and I think what's going to happen, we see issues like safe harbor and other issues come up. Politically, I think the environment is going to force the U.S. to adopt to some of those. Just from a global business perspective, I think the U.S. is going to have to adopt privacy and security standards that other countries around the world, and Europe particularly, are adopting. We're going to be forced to if we want to do business with Europe.
I think a lot of it too is a generational thing, right? So, people in the millennial range they'll hand over whatever. If you'll give me a notification on my phone that's even remotely helpful, I'll give you everything everything you can possibly know about me to make my life easier.
Really, you think the millennials are that much of a pushover about information?
I think that we have done a good job of conditioning the just connected generation more than anything else, right? And so then you've got like the Gen Xers, where I'll fall into that category, that are a little more cautious, right? I'm like, all right, really? Do I need to give you even like my email address? Right. A little more cautious. And then you've got the people who just flat out didn't have a computer until they were in their 20s or 30s, right? And there's a lot more. There's a lot more. A lot more concern there, right? Like, your secrets were in a book, like in your drawer, and that was it. And even just putting them online at all, online banking, was slow to be adopted by people, because the people that actually had money were the people that were concerned about online banking, right? And now 20 years later, it's just pervasive. Everybody uses it. But I do think the privacy concerns. Just think about what's acceptable now versus what was acceptable 5 years ago, even to you, right? Like, we're so willing to click buttons and do things that even 5 years ago, all of us here probably would have been like, I don't know if I really want to do that. And now it pops up and it's like, you'll share every post you've ever made and every picture and your birthday and all your friends, so that we can tell you your tag cloud of things you tell them. You're like, yeah, okay, that sounds reasonable, right?
I buy a pair of jeans, and at the end, the clerk very routinely says, phone number and email, please.
Yeah.
And I just politely say, I prefer not to give it. But it's just amazing that they're expecting it from everyone. Does everyone really give them their email in exchange for buying a pair of jeans?
But I think what we're seeing, though, the reason I kind of rant on that a little bit is because the people that are going to be, if we look 5 year, 2020, 2025, whatever it is, right? The people who will be in more decision maker roles in the influential companies are increasingly going to be the people who are more comfortable giving up their data and more comfortable asking other people to give up their data, right? And so, where do we draw the line? I totally agree with you, Greg, that at some point there needs to be some regulation, and we'll probably see that just to be on par with other countries and be able to do business. But it's challenging to find that balance, I think.
Well, I think there's a difference in consumer behavior that you guys are describing, and I think business behavior, because obviously compliance and other regulations are kind of dictating this. I don't think it's as casual as giving up your email address when you're at the Gap. When you talk about these safe harbor agreements, the issues right now that the courts are wrangling with are very significant, and every global business is being impacted by these. And that's why I think that it's going to bubble up again, not from the consumer side of things, but certainly from the business side of things, is going to be a very big prevailing issue that's going to have to be managed in a globally connected world.
Isn't there a sense that some people are leery of the U.S.-based cloud providers because they know they're more vulnerable to a subpoena, and so they want to work with a European provider for that reason because it's going to be tighter controls?
So remember I mentioned the pendulum swinging back and forth on different things. Well, the pendulum is swinging on data sovereignty right now in the direction of more regulation, more laws, and making sure that your data is under your control. And it does seem to be, a bit more important for European markets. But I think that's going to continue to play itself out, and people are entitled to regulate in their own jurisdictions according to their democratic process. But when you said a minute ago that somebody asked you for your email, I mean, that is so crazy, outdated. Who cares what your email is? What did you do when you got in the store? How did you reverse the equation of analyze, buy, and spend? And what did you do when you left the store and went into the next store? And which store did you go into? And that doesn't have to be personalized. It can be anonymized so that the pattern and the decision process and how to make the right goods and services available to the right people at the right price at the right time, that's what I think is more powerful. Whether or not they can send you an email with a coupon is kind of, to me, old-fashioned brick-and-mortar thinking. Making sure that you get what you want when you want it, and that your preferences as a consumer are charted and then compared to other markets, and then the customization can come back. So you start general, but then you can get specific. Even without knowing too much about you personally, you can know how to better target consumers. And that's going to be, as I say, it takes the margin of error out of commerce, which is huge.
It's the subtle loss of privacy that has crept up on a lot of us because the data collection and analytics are so good, right? Like, I don't need to know anything about you really if you've got a phone in your pocket that's pinging my Wi-Fi, and you've got a credit card that you're swiping throughout. If I'm at a resort or if I'm in a retail, like I can know everything about you and how you purchase and who you are based on when you come in, which parts of the store you go to, how you shop, what you buy, right? Just with those two things, and you never giving me anything about yourself, I know more than you think you know. Right. Even about yourself, and that's where people get surprised, and they go, "Whoa, you're collecting all this stuff about me," and it's like, well, what do you want?
Scott, what you're describing there, though, is a level of interaction that can be measured. We've been able to measure that for a while. I think what's particularly interesting, we've got use cases of our own customers, retail customers, where they're able to visualize the shopping patterns of large groups of customers within an area, the patterns that they walk within the store, and how they're merchandising and how they're presenting things. This doesn't require any interaction. It just requires a physical body walking through the store that's being tracked and what that looks like. And so as a consequence, those businesses are modifying the shopping experience, obviously, to be able to sell more goods and services, and so it's so deep now. It doesn't even require you to make a transaction or to engage with the retailer. Just your physical presence walking through that store. They're measuring patterns of what that looks like to create a better experience for the people that are walking in.
But a lot of that, back to my machine learning kind of tipping point here, is great. You're collecting all that data, and retail is a good example where it doesn't today. A lot of the decisions that get made are not real time, right? It's let's look at what was happening, and you have beacons and you have other things that are like, oh, someone's in this aisle, they've bought XYZ before, let me pop up something on the display about a coupon for them, or give them a notification on their phone. Like, that happens today. That's more real time use. But what if you could do live A/B testing of things in your store based on individuals that are walking through that things about them? Like, you're not going to have someone sitting there turning dials or typing in different things. That becomes kind of a machine learning exercise. And so all that big data that you've got is very valuable when you do something with it. And that's the tipping point, I think, that we're all trying to get at, is IT, as we know it, is going to become the most important thing that companies invest in, and technologies like cloud and big data and high performance everything are going to enable that next wave. And we're starting to see it with our customers. Greg, you've hinted that you are too. But I really do think that if we look 3 to 5, 10 years for sure, right? This is just one of those things that we're like, you remember when we didn't do this? That was crazy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And on that note, my robot overlords are telling me to click stop broadcast. I guess my machine learning systems have clicked in, so I can only tell do what the system tells me to do.
Just remember, James,
yes.
that as long as you're getting paid less than the machine costs to maintain.
There's a worry and a threat and a fear and maybe a hope in there somewhere, so I'll hang on to the hopeful part of that. Gentlemen, I greatly appreciate your expertise. It's been fantastic. I will send you the link. We can all tweet it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and happy holidays.
Thank you, James. It's been fantastic.
Sure.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Yes.
Fun.